Well, welcome to another installment of our series of interviews with experts and professionals throughout the country. And today I'm very pleased to introduce an alum to the UCLA Certificate Program, Katie Andersen. Katie, we're glad to have you with us today.
Thank you.
So I know my students, this is the last class that they're taking before they go do their practicum. So I wanted to find out a little bit. They've heard from you about from the athletic side, but I wanted to invite you back to talk about what it is to be an alum from the certificate program, where you've been and kind of where you're at right now. So let's talk about what prompted you to start the UCLA program, first of all. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So for many years, I had thought about being a college counselor. I worked in the software industry for 15 years. I had worked in a consulting role for a number of those years, and I really loved being a consultant. I had obviously enough of a technical I was not a computer science major or any of that in college, but I definitely picked it up along the way, having worked in the software industry. So I was very excited about all the things that have happened online, research that's available, tools to use as a college counselor. All those things were great. And then I also love working with students. So those sort of three elements combined, in addition to the fact that I had had children and I had taken some years off, and right now my children, my son is in 7th grade and my daughter's in 5th grade. So I kind of after taking some years off of working, I really wanted to develop something that was my own, that allowed me to have my own schedule, and I could grow as I wanted. I really have made a very concerted effort to keep my business small. Not many college counselors I talk to are like, no, I really only want to have 10 students. Most of them want to have big businesses, and I don't. I prefer to keep it quite small for a number of years, knowing that I will have the time to do this later. I will have the time to grow my business later, but for now, this is how I can do it. And so it prompted me, and also my family had hired a college counselor when I went through this high school to college transition. So I kind of knew what it was about. So all those things combined sort of prompted me to want to go back to the UCLA program. And I looked around, and at the time, UCLA was kind of it. I think maybe UCI had started. There were a number of other programs around, but that UCLA was by far the best. And the fact that it was online was just a huge benefit because I didn't have to go anywhere outside of my living room to participate.
And so as you did the UCLA program, what was the most beneficial about the UCLA classes for you?
I really loved that each person in the class could come at this program with their own experience and their own interests and develop those interests as they went along. For me personally, my interest was student athletes. So in every single class that I took, I made a point out of when I introduced myself to my classmates saying, here's who I am. I'm a former student athlete in college. I went to Duke. I'm planning on incorporating this into as a very primary part of my business. And so everything you hear out of me is going to be focused on student athletes, where many of the other people in classes were, a number coming from with learning disability issues that they were focused on, or low income issues, or, urban environment, or, whatever it was their thing. Many people coming from having worked in schools, they were doing this as just an added level of, continuing education for their own purposes. So I love that we could all come together, and I really loved hearing the level of discussion from especially people who've been doing this for a number of years was intense. It was amazing. I learned so much by hearing, for those of us who were just getting started, we have a certain kind of question and certain kinds of things, issues we're struggling with, versus the people who've been doing this for 15 years and just trying to keep up on the topics. So that was hugely beneficial.
I see that in our class too, because we have a lot of people from lots of different backgrounds, public schools, private schools, community-based organizations, people who have experience as independents or who are trying to launch their practices in independence.
Mhm.
And so, and both international and domestic. And so it does add to a great richness of discussions for the class. So, um, so where did you do your practicum then, Katie, and how
So,
did you do that?
okay, so when I first started the UCLA program, I knew that the practicum was coming. I knew that that was the last part of it. So I actually got it started quite early on trying to identify where I would do that, because I knew within a year, I did it all, the entire thing within 1 year.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up, I live one street away from our local high school. So I got in over there, got to know the counselors. And well, as it turned out, as I got closer to actually having a paperwork signed saying, yes, you can do your practicum here, they said to me, they went up to the school district level, and the school district said, nope, sorry, unless you're overseen by somebody who has, a higher level certification, you can't do it here. And I thought, oh my gosh, do they even know what what they're not getting? I'm a free resource in a school that actually produces quite a lot of student athletes to go on to play, college sports. So, whatever, I kind of said, okay, well, fine, I'll hit the next school. So I went around to a number of the private schools, figuring that was maybe a little easier route. I didn't have to deal with school districts. Mm-hmm. Many of them, again, the private schools have large counseling departments, and many of them already have somebody who dedicated to student athletes. So I went a little further up the freeway and started where I probably should have started in the first place, was Mission Viejo High School, which, I mean, they're on average producing 20 or more kids every year who go on to play college athletics. They have one of the best football teams in the state, probably even close in the country. They've got a phenomenal football program. So given that they have so many athletes who come out of there going on to play college athletics, it was such a great fit for me. Mm-hmm. And given the pressure from the NCAA on working through academic eligibility issues, it was such a perfect fit for me to be able to come into the guidance department. The vice president or the vice principal of guidance brought me in and said, okay, she's here, she's a resource, and she's just going to work with student athletes. She's here to help us. And so I was able to, initially it was just the practicum period, which is only like 30 something hours. I mean, it wasn't that much. Right. I started with maybe a couple of hours a week. And by the end of my official, practicum period, I just said, look, there's so much more to learn here. I would love to stay. Will you have me? And they said, sure. So I stayed the entire year.
Oh, wow.
It was such a fabulous learning opportunity. And the best part about it was the number of kids I got to interface, and families really got to work with. If I had only stayed for my practicum, it would have been quite limited. But because I got the whole year, I got to develop presentations and give them during tutorial period. The kids have, a 20, 25-minute block of time where they can choose what they do, which teacher's classroom they sit in. Well, they could come into the little theater and listen to a tutorial on how, what to expect from, going through the recruiting process. I got to meet with lots and lots of families that way, many more than I can when I'm just working one-on-one with a family. So for me, that was great, and it all worked out great. And not only that, but I got to continue my relationship with them, because now I go back to that school and I give presentations, once or twice a year. I always can drop in their counseling department and say hi to everybody. And there's always a question, or people are contacting me on email and say, hey, I've got this sticky issue. Can you help me? And so it's wonderful that continuing those relationships as somebody who had worked there. So I would say to any of you counselors out there who do your practicum somewhere, pick it somewhere that you really can have an ongoing relationship with those people going forward, because, networking is part of the deal when you get out of this program. It's continuing to build your network. And that's a pretty key one if you're going to spend all that time doing it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, the schools benefit and programs or wherever, because they can do it through a community-based organization, or for many of our counselors, they'll be in their schools themselves doing the practicums. But sometimes it does take a little time and effort to make that happen. So what other advice do you have for students in this UCLA certificate class?
Well, I think when it comes to doing your practicum, obviously part of that process is documenting a plan, right? You have to go into it with a plan, your goals on what it is you want to achieve. Mm-hmm. Take that plan very seriously, because I know some people, over the course of listening to all my peers doing the same practicum, and finding that some of them were really struggling with the things that they wanted to do, they couldn't do inside of the organization where they were allowed to do the practicum. So I would say just, put forward your plan and try to stick to it as best you can, but realize that you have to be fluid. You have to be willing to go with whatever happens there. You're just essentially a volunteer. So you're there to add as much value as you can and learn as much as you can. And whatever that means, it means you have to be flexible and just look at it as the best learning opportunity that you have for that period of time. So I would say, and revisit that plan every week. Part of your practicum is that you have to document what it is, major things that happened during that week, and share that with your class. And kind of always revisiting, wow, have I really accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish in this period of time, and adjust as you go. For me, that was key. I had a vision for what I wanted to create when I was there, and I ended up being able to do all of it and more, which was awesome, and leave the school with a website that allowed that documented everything that I had done when I was there, so that future students and future counselors would be able to refer back to it in going forward. And it wasn't just that I was there for this period of time and then left, and then the resource was gone. This is something that can live on for them. So think about that, how you can leave a lasting impression on that organization.
I think that's a really key tip. I remember when I was working on my master's degree, the last part of it is doing an internship, and went into a school, and if they're not prepared, if you don't have a plan, you can end up sitting behind a desk and not really getting as much out of it as you need to. And taking initiative, I looked and observed certain things that were going on. So I put together a project and went to the counseling office and said, what if I work on this? And they were more than happy to have me do that. They didn't have time to put stuff together. So, you're absolutely right. Coming in with a plan and having able to articulate, this is how I can support you in the work you're doing. Because they don't want to see it as more work, because that's the last thing they need, right?
Right. That is the last thing they need, is somebody they have to babysit, being able to be independent. And, yes, you have to ask permission. You have to say, okay, here's my plan. Here's what I want to do. And the minute they give you permission to do it, you just need to go do it. You can't sit around waiting for someone to tell you what to do all day. Right. Schools, they don't have time for that.
No, they don't. So, how have you, after you finished your program, your practicum, then you launched your practice. So how did you find that? Was that easy to do, hard to do? What kind of process did you go through to launch your practice after finishing your program?
Well, I have to say that starting the documentation, initially I started writing a business plan, thinking, okay, I know I don't need to make this a super detailed business plan, but I do need to get the guts down. So I have a vision for where I want to go in the next year. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, I want to look at 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years in terms of, what does that look like? I also knew that I was starting with no money. My husband had said, when we agreed that I was going to go do this, he said, look, we'll take our personal finances, we'll, invest in this education for you. But after that, you're on your own. So we agreed. Sorry about that. We agreed that I would keep my budget very tight for the first year. I would only spend money on things that were absolutely necessary. I'd work from the house. And again, as a person doing this, depending on who you are and what your goals are, you may find this very different. But for somebody who is going into independent counseling and starting a business from scratch, the only major investment I made in my first year of business was buying a computer. We had a home office that I could already convert into my own. Yes, I had to buy materials here and there. I actually talked to a number of college counselors who had already been doing it for a while, and realized that the first mistake I was not going to make was spending money on things that I couldn't change. So, for example, printed materials. I have never sent out a mailer. Some people find mailers very effective in their areas. For me, those were, I have a secret network, which is all the parents that I'm in my middle school PTA board member. I'm a board member of my elementary school PTA. I know a lot of parents who have high school age kids. I'm kind of in that mix already. So it didn't take me long to get my business, just word of mouth, being able to tell people what I'm doing, and they immediately jumped on it because there's really nobody doing what I'm doing in my area. The combination of both college counseling and athletic recruiting. So that for me was great, but I did buy a website. I got my own website, and I used Weebly as my website editing tool. So I went as cheap as I could on, not investing in. I didn't hire somebody to do it. I did everything myself. I made my own business. I printed my own business cards for the first year. I just did everything on my home printer. I really did not spend money as much as possible. And my business plan was enough of a skeleton that it gave me a focus, but didn't lock me into being afraid of doing things. I'd say that the hardest part about getting started was that fear of, okay, I know I have some basic materials. I have a sales packet that I want to give out when I, talk to families the first time. I have enough information there. I didn't necessarily have I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't necessarily have all the materials built when I first started for maybe the end of the year. But I knew I'd work on that as I went. And the hardest part was just diving in and saying, okay, I'm here. I'm going to get started. I don't have everything at 100% now, but I will, 2 months time. And because I'm a perfectionist and I want everything to be just so. And so when you're like that, it's very hard sometimes to allow yourself to dive in when you're not 100% knowing exactly what you're doing. And the best part about that for me was learning that it is never going to be 100%. There is always something you can change. There's always something to be updated. And so as a result, I have to this day never printed a brochure that I've spent money on boxes and boxes of brochures. I print everything on my computer because I'm always changing it. And it's fine. No one's ever complained about it. I make everything into a PDF file and put it on my website. It's fine. I think a lot of people, especially if you come from a professional background, you have this vision or marketing, especially, you want everything to be the glossy brochure and look just perfect. And lots of times that's not the most effective way to always, when you are in a business that's changing so frequently, you have to decide what you want to do with that. And that was just my choice. So, and then obviously spreading the word. And I really also focused very, very much on producing great results from the get-go. I did not, every time I felt that something was maybe a relationship with a client was starting to slip sideways a little bit, I had to say, okay, nope, it is so critical that every single one of these families comes out of this process feeling great about what we did and what we tried. And, I got incredibly lucky that all of my students the first year, everybody got to where they wanted to go. And, and I should say that one or two of them maybe ended up in places that weren't necessarily their first choice, but I felt strongly that was the best choice for them. Definitely knowing that you have to produce, you don't want to have major slip ups that first year. And if something starts to go sideways, you need to pause, recorrect, figure out if there's something, some piece of information you didn't know, or, something you need to educate yourself on further and really dive in, and don't be afraid to just dive in deep to figure those things out, because they will come back to you tenfold later down the line.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's really good words of advice. And it goes back to the practicum too, is having a plan, knowing what it is. And I think having the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year is a really good, milestones or benchmarks to have too, because you have to have a vision of where you want to go and what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you're going to get there. So I think that's really, really important. So anything else that you would like to add, or words of wisdom that you would like, I wish I had known type of thing?
Well, I would say that I would encourage everybody to consider joining a networking organization. So there are lots of them out there, NACAC, and then depending on where you're located, for me, it's WACAC is my local, Western organization, or IUCA or HECA. Any of those organizations are great opportunities to network, and, also continuing education. Continuing education is going to be an ongoing part of you being a counselor. You're never going to know everything. And honestly, there are a lot of things that change, especially with what's happening in our world right now on the financial aid side. Yep. There's so many things that little details, SAT and ACT, all of that. So never be afraid to, never think that you know everything. You're never going to know everything. You always have to, going to these conferences are great. Getting to know other counselors that are struggling with some of the same issues and coming up with solutions. It's great. Some people I found are in areas that are hyper competitive, and counselors do not want to talk about what they're doing. Fair enough. I really feel very strongly that I'm willing to talk to anybody about what I'm doing, because I feel so strongly that our connection and our willingness to share adds value to all of us in this profession. So I feel, I'm willing to talk to anyone. When I've done these presentations, I get phone calls all the time from people who just want to talk about, hey, I had this client, or I had this whatever. And I think that's great. I think that's why we're doing this, is to be better at our jobs every day. So I'd say be prepared. And what I do is I kind of on an annual basis, I pick 1 or 2 topics that I really want to know more about. I want to be better at helping my students with their essays. I want to be better at helping, understanding everything that's going on in the financial aid department. So I'll continue to sign up for Lynn O'Shaughnessy's financial, she's always doing continuing education on especially the financial aid side. I find that those are really great extensions to what you're learning in this class, and it's deep, and you can continue to challenge yourself in kind of the off season while your brain is taking a break from applications, and you're working on making sure that you're set up for the next round of kids coming through. And then the other thing I would say, software-wise, when it came to setting up my business, I evaluated lots of different software packages and how I wanted to manage my business. I decided that from an accounting perspective, just the easiest thing for me to do was to use QuickBooks. So that's what I use for all my accounting. It allows me the flexibility to do progress billing and things that, if I set up a client, initially, and I say I'm only billing them 3 times a year because I do package deals, okay, or 3 times in the whole time that I'm working with them, it allows me to keep track of all that. But then I initially started using College Planner Pro. They were the first company that I used for kind of the workflow part of my business. I knew that I wanted something that was web-based, that my students could have a student login. So I initially used them, and then eventually ended up switching over to Guided Path. And, and there are, I don't know how many, I haven't even looked lately to see how many other products there are out there, but I think it's really worth evaluating using a software package, because it can really help just keep yourself organized. And it's yet another tool for you to say to a family, here, look, this is how I'm going to help your child stay on track. This is how I stay on track. And this is a tool that you can get into excuse me, and be able to participate in this process as well.
Right.
So those are all things that I think are worthy investments that are ongoing expenses, but also, pay back throughout your process, because you are organized and you can present a united front when you're working, and good organizational tools.
Absolutely. It adds to the professional level of what you have to offer. And what I tell people too is that our students live in an online world, a virtual world. They're using apps and tools and things. So, we need to be doing the same thing with them too. So that's good words of advice. So thank you, Katie, very much. And if people have questions, can they reach you or contact you?
Absolutely. Yep. Email is probably the easiest way.
Okay.
But that would be great. And thank you so much for inviting me back. It's fun. It's kind of strange. I remember sitting here being in the classes. So this is really fun to be invited back to share my experience.
Well, thank you, Katie. You take care. We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay.